Hey, it's Jeremy from Jeremy.net. I am a comic book artist, writer, creator, self-publisher, and I share my creative process here with you online. If you enjoy these live streams, would like to get additional bonus live streams twice a month, you can become a Patreon subscriber for as little as $2 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/Jeremy. It's patreon.com/GERIMI. You'll also get access to an online archive of my comic books you can read digitally and a Patreon-exclusive Discord server where we share art talk, works in progress, tips, tools, give each other feedback, and more. So head on over and check that out. If you would like to get a free digital sketchbook, work in progress animated GIFs delivered right to your inbox, blog posts about what I'm reading, what I'm watching, what's inspiring me creatively, you can sign up for my free monthly newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. And if you'd like to purchase physical copies of my comic books, or if you read digitally on Kindle, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. That'll forward you to my Amazon author page. You can pick up my books there. And as I mentioned on the Patreon live stream this week, we're going to be having one of our monthly sessions, art book study group, where we do a deep dive into some of the best art books around, try to suck out all the knowledge we can. That's going to be Monday night, 7:30 Pacific Standard Time. And we'll have the voice channel open on Discord. So as opposed to just typing comments in the chat, you actually get on there and talk personally. We can just talk one-to-one, exchange ideas, you can ask questions, So if you're interested in that, now's a great time to sign up. You'll also have access to the archive of all of the previous sessions. Okay. So let's see here. See Byron in the chat. Hey, Byron. How you doing? Good to see you. Happy Sunday. Welcome. Today we are doing some more fixing bad figure drawings. I was going over my work from class this week, and there's a lot of stuff for me to analyze, to dig deeper into, to try and rework and understand. So we're going to be doing some of that today. All right, let's switch the camera over. And I'm always messing around with my camera placement and settings for this, trying to find something that shows what I'm drawing, but also shows what I'm looking at, the reference that I'm pulling from. It's always a little bit of a tricky conundrum. And there's also the trickiness of placing the camera in a spot where it's giving you guys a good view of what I'm working on without actually blocking my view. So over here is the first couple of sketches from this week's figure drawing session. And, as I've mentioned in the past, for me, it really seems like if I don't get the gestures down, then the figures themselves, there's not much I can do to save the drawing. Let me move this over a little bit more. Angle this. So, the class I'm taking is one with Carl Ganas at figuredrawing.school.com, and it's on costumes and drapery. So for me, the real challenge here is getting the gesture and then not having the drapery feel like it's just plastered on top, but to have it feel like it's an extension of the gesture. And honestly, just getting gestures to look right and feel right is enough of a challenge on its own, even without the costumes and such. But let's dive in, take a shot, see where it takes us. So let's see here. So I always like to start with a little light mark of tone to kind of describe the height of the figure in this pose. And then from there, trying to get sort of a stick figure gesture. And it's always challenging when the actual costume the model is wearing hides one of the feet, if not both of the feet. In this case, one foot is exposed. The other one, I just kind of have to guess / imply where those feet are. I agree. Byron says gesture is a beast, all of its own. Yes, very much so. In fact, a lot of the time when I am starting a pose in class, the thing that gets me, like I think anyone who has done figure drawing for any length of time is familiar with that idea of feeling like you're just barely getting started and then the model is on to the next pose. For me, a lot of that comes from the fact that I am struggling with or pursuing trying to capture the elegant feel of the figure's gesture. The model took a gesture that, took a pose that it's a challenging pose, but it's challenging in a good way. You want something that is unique as opposed to just a stock, like, oh, they're standing heroically, or oh, they're crouched, leaning forward. They give you something that's really unique, but because of that uniqueness, you spend all of your time trying to pursue the gesture, and you don't really get into, if it's, a nude figure, you don't have time to really get into the anatomy. If it's something like costume like this, you may not even get a chance to get into what's really going on with the costume, because you're just trying to capture what does that drawing feel like. And I have found that when I am put in a position where I need to choose between the limited amount of time I have to draw the figure, let me bring this down a little bit more. When I'm given limited amount of time to draw the figure, and I have to choose between moving on and trying to get figurative details as opposed to continuing to pursue a gesture that's not quite working, or trying to fix the gesture, I find that if I just choose to keep the drawing moving, I tend to always be dissatisfied. Now, that's very conflicting, because on the other hand, kind of one of the points of figure drawing is not to sit there and be a perfectionist. It's to learn how to just be in the moment, draw what you have time to capture, and make it as expressive as possible. So sitting there and agonizing over a gesture that's not working when you've got a whole figure that you're supposed to be working on is counterintuitive to the process. I actually think I need to move this over and position the camera so it's sort of looking at me from the right, because otherwise my hand is going to be blocking this as I draw the whole time. I need to get it set up so I can work this way. Well, actually, you know what? I think part of that is just the fact that I was sort of moving through here and then ended up doing this hand, which is farther to the left. The fact that I'm drawing that later in the pose as opposed to early on is probably really the problem. I don't think I necessarily have to readjust the camera. Let me minor tweak here. I'm still not 100% happy with my camera setup as it is. Hence, constantly making tweaks and adjustments instead of just drawing. If anything, I would love to have a setup where I could have the camera completely overhead and looking down. The model that we were drawing was dressed in a pirate girl costume. And actually, it's funny. I think this may be the same costume and the same model that my buddy Carl Altstetter made a finished piece of that he sells as a print of a pirate girl. Because I think he developed that drawing from a life drawing session at Bob Cotto's workshop many years ago. And knowing that a lot of the same models work for the various teachers and art educators throughout LA, it is very possible, nay, likely, that this is the same costume and same model from my friend's print. Something that I have been struggling with lately is just how messy I'm getting with the figure drawing block in. I don't seem to be really drawing, leaving a lot of open space. I get in and it's very gray and I'm kind of like smearing my way through. But what I've been hoping is that my approach would be like looking at a blurry picture, something that's out of focus. And as I draw, it slowly comes into focus. That's what I'm attempting to convey. Not in terms of like, while you guys are watching, I'm trying to make it like, ooh, it's slowly coming into focus. But I'm trying to move from indistinct general forms to specific ones. Moving from, okay, that's kind of a stick figure to, oh, this is the arm, this is the wrist, this is a fold in the fabric. And I see we've got a comment from Twitch. Hey, Yeast Books. Thanks for stopping in. They ask, hello, is this for a project? And not for a project per se. I take figure drawing classes regularly. And one of the most important things for me in terms of improving my craft is not just the actual session where I'm working from the model. It's the time after class where I go and I look at the drawings that did not come out as well as I had hoped. And I basically redraw them, trying to analyze and figure out what it is that I don't know. Why did I not capture this particular aspect of a drawing well? Why is the gesture off? Why are the proportions wonky? Why did I not, if it's something like a costume here, why did I not capture the drapery? Because if I don't go back and analyze these things, I just keep making the same mistakes over and over again. In terms of projects, I have a comic book that I'm currently writing and haven't started drawing yet, but I have been live streaming sessions where I've been working on character designs and creature development. This past week, I got absolutely no work done on the comic at all. This is one of those weeks where life was just busy and I had very little time to touch any of that. So yeah, this is not for a project per se, but everything I draw is part of me trying to improve my craft, trying to improve my storytelling, my anatomy. Learning is never a waste. Let's see here. My buddy Jim Lujan in the chat. Jim says, Jeremy, your art always looks amazing. You have a great style. That is incredibly humbling. Thank you, Jim. Hell, maybe I should do a comic book in all charcoal pencil. Let's see here. My boy Amar is in the chat. He says, hello, Jeremy. Good day to you and everyone else. Good day to you as well, Amar. Thank you for popping in. Let's see here. Yes Books says, a comic. That's great. I just released a story last month. All right, cool. I will try to track down, if you post any artwork on your Twitch handle, I can go there and look for your Instagram or whatever platform you're releasing your work on. Are you doing like a web comic? You doing Kickstarter? Print books in comic shops? What's your process for getting your work out? Always happy to hear what other comic creators are doing. Let's see here. Something else that I'm trying to remember is to be careful about how I use line, in the sense that if I'm kind of tonally blocking in these details on the figure, to remember that line, like dark lines, draw the eye, and I should really try to keep them focused where I want people's attention. Let things get a little bit blurrier as I move away from the center of the figure. Let's see here. Let's see here. Yes Book says it's not a comic. I've been doing audio dramas. Audio dramas. All right. It'll be something nice for me to listen to while I'm drawing. I look forward to checking it out. Fantasy, sci-fi, horror, any particular genre? And the laugh was because I saw Gary, the also great Gary Hodges in the chat says, good afternoon, Jeremy. And is that the Jim Lujan? You know what? It's actually a clone. Surprisingly, there's like 7 or 8 of them running around out there. People have always wondered, how is Jim so prolific? How does he keep all these stories going? How's he doing all the voices and all the music in his movies? You know what? Clone farm. Clone farm. His animations are not organic. He's like the Monsanto of animation. Let's see here. And I will tell you something that I still like. The more I draw, there's things that I've known since I was a kid, since I was in high school studying art, but still trying to understand and master years later. And one of them is just simplicity. Now, when you look at somebody like Bruce Timm and how he creates a sense of a complete figure and a complete character with very few lines, I'm not trying to draw in a Bruce Timm style. But that said, I realize putting in too many lines or putting in lines that don't really describe or say anything detract from the drawing. And what I'm trying to do is find ways to express as much as possible of the character, the gesture, the actual volumes. I'm trying to get all of that into the drawing with as few lines as possible. And man, it's very challenging. It's very, very challenging. Because you're either not saying anything at all, or you're putting a line down, you're like, well, no, that's not right. Well, no, that's not right. It's like the fewer lines and tones and shapes you have in a drawing, the more correct, the righter you have to be. The fewer decisions you have to make. Like each line, I don't want to tell you guys, oh, start obsessing over every line. But I am starting to obsess a little bit over every line. Because the fewer lines there are, each line is a chance to move the drawing or the story of the drawing forward, or it is a chance to obscure. And obviously, well, not obviously, I'm sure there's some people who have reasons to want to obscure, but I'm not one of them, or at least I'm not one of them in this moment. So my challenge here is expressing without obscuring, clarifying instead of cluttering. And honestly, something I really need to do and have not made time to do is doing studies. One of the things we ended up doing as an assignment from class was working from Greek statues, like photos of Greek statues. Because all of these, the drapery, all of this, like literally the part down here, this back of the dress is the thing that the class is supposed to be about. However, I always feel like I'm just sort of faking it. When instead of faking it, what we're supposed to be doing is simplifying, getting to the essence of it. All right, I don't think I really need to get in there and draw her pant leg. I think that would distract from what I've already got going on here. Let's see here. Yes Books says paranormal, folklore, and urban fantasy. I'm working on sci-fi now. All right, cool. I dig all of those. I'll definitely check it out. Thank you. And Jim says, Gary, stop stalking me. Hi, Gary. The Monsanto of animation. But see, the beauty is soon your seeds will be everywhere. Every animation that exists will have seeds of Luhan in it. And then you can sue them all and just take all of their animation. James in the chat says, I'm here. Hope you're well. I'm doing well. Thanks for showing up, James. The Monsanto of animation needs to be on the full fungus poster. Well, if you need a pull quote, feel free to use it. And James says, I don't know when you'll be doing film studies again, but I wonder if you have thoughts on taking the color out and focusing on lighting and value that way. So the movie Cruising was originally supposed to be shot in black and white. So I took some of those shots into Photoshop, took the color out to see how that would look. It's not a particularly colorful movie to begin with, but I was curious. Well, I will tell you, honestly, I have thought that, by the way, I am done with this one, and I'm going to move on now. There is another drawing. Like, honestly, every time I start figuring, I'm going to come back to the film studies thing in a second. I'm just telling you what I'm drawing now. So this page has like the first 4 poses that I did from that particular figure drawing class. And every time I start a class, the beginning drawings are always horrible. What I start with always sucks because I'm warming up. I'm getting into it. So now I'm moving on to the next drawing that's on that set there. Now, as far as the film studies, I really, really enjoyed doing those film studies. There was something about it that, in the same way that doing these gesture drawings is a process of me analyzing my work. It's creative, but it's also educational for me. Those film studies really kind of lit me up, and I felt like, ooh, it seems like there was a lot more discussion being brought up, a lot more engagement. Everyone was really interested in talking about either the films that I was looking at or film in relation to storytelling and comics, or just studying values. And it made me want to do more of them in the future. And I was actually really planning to do another film study today, but I realized I'm going into a week where, unfortunately, similar to last week, I'm not going to have as much spare time as I would like. And knowing that I was going to want to redraw some of my work from figure drawing class, because that's kind of the main thing in class, is homework's not mandatory, but we can either send in some of drawings that we want critiques on, or we can send in drawings that we're particularly proud of, but still to get some feedback on. And for me, I feel like a lot of the drawings that I do in class, if I take the time to do what I'm doing now, because obviously, I spent a good, 20 minutes drawing this one over here. In class, the original drawing was a 5-minute pose. And having the extra time to sit here and work out what I am or am not doing correctly, to me, that feels like that's more valuable than just sending what I did in class and saying, okay, this is the best I could do, or this is something I'm struggling with, will you help me? What I find valuable when I'm, submitting work for critique by the instructor is to try to fix the problems myself. And I think that's probably the most valuable thing I've gotten from studying with him over the years, is if you actually try on your own to fix things that are not working well, you'll learn. You'll see, oh, wait, there are answers. And that is what will give you the capacity to, when you're in the moment actually making art, it'll give you the opportunity, it'll give you the tools, the mental tools to look at the thing you're making and say, this is working, this is not, I need to change these aspects. And that's really, when people say, I just want to learn how to get better, that's really what it comes down to. It's just learning how to make better decisions. So this practice of doing these drawings and reworking them, analyzing them, it is, to me, the most valuable thing is to do these drawings and turn these in for homework. Because with this, I've at least gone through, as opposed to just taking what came out of me. Because what comes out of me during class, there's a lot of other factors. How tired or focused, how tired I am that day, how focused or unfocused I am. Those things, also the added time of being able to think through, because when you're just working from the model in the moment, you make design choices that you can literally finish the pose. So it's like you're in a 5-minute session, you go through, and at the end of 5 minutes, the model ends and moves to the next pose. And the minute they finish that pose, you look at your drawing, you're like, oh, I should have done A, B, and C instead of X, Y, and Z. You can literally be right there and see those decisions. So the opportunity, which no one's preventing you from, that opportunity is open to everyone to just look at the same drawing and say, all right, what would happen if I took this drawing and fixed the things that I know are wrong? The things, not necessarily that the instructor is like, oh, you should have done this, but just things that you, as an artist, look at your own work and being your own self-critic, look at it and say, oh, this isn't right. This is too long. This is too wide. This is too dark or too light. This should have more of a curve to it. This should be more of a straight or angular thing. Looking at those things in your drawing and being able to identify those things and practice making those changes, to me, that's what helps you when you do the next pose. The next time you're working from the model live, helps you make better real-time decisions. So that is why I'm doing this instead of doing more film studies. Wow, I really went off from talking about film studies. I went right back into, I think it's because my brain is trying to talk, but I'm also working on fixing problems here at the same time. Point being, yes, I will definitely be doing film studies again. I will probably be doing film studies next week. And I think until I get to the point where I am starting actually drawing my next comic, it's either going to be film studies or it's going to be character designs for that next comic. That's probably what the live streams for the next couple months will be. I'd like to think that I'll be ready to start drawing in a month, but I would rather be cautiously optimistic. I'd rather be cautiously pessimistic than to tell you, oh yeah, I'm going to be starting next month, and then it's still another month or so beyond that before I start working on the next comic. But yeah, even once I start the comic, I think I had the reaction that I think you also had, in that the film studies conversation lit something up analytically. Like, this is something that we're all like seeing, oh wow, there's some secrets of storytelling and composition to be learned here. That's sort of how I felt. And in terms of taking black and white color films and doing film studies of them in black and white, that is absolutely something that I'm in favor of. And it's something that I do plan to do. I was going to work just with black and white images for the next couple of sessions because I want to work just on getting better at values. But there will be a point where I'm like, all right, I want to work on color. And I think taking color movies and looking at them black and white to help work on values, and then going in and doing color studies from them, is a great learning tool. So everything that you said, James, I am wholeheartedly in favor of and plan to do in the future. I'm curious, for anybody who was here last week, or if they caught the replay, what you guys thought of the film studies, because I don't know, for some reason it seemed like it got people even more abuzz than the figure drawing. Figure drawing is one of those things where it depends on your personality. Some people really, really love it. For some people, it's like going to the gym or eating broccoli. They're like, yeah, I do not enjoy working from the model. All it does is remind me of all the things I struggle with. For me, confronting the things I struggle with is kind of the point. But not everybody, I get that not everybody wants to do that. Not everybody, it can feel like bashing your head against a brick wall. Whereas for me, I think it's the work ethic I got from being an athlete in college and in high school, definitely. That work ethic of there's always going to be things you're going to suck at. And unless you work at them, you're not going to get better. And after a number of years of studying the figure, I feel like I've gotten to that point where I'm not as frustrated about not being good anymore, or not being as good as I'd like to be. Because, as Jim said, I've got a great style. And so that's going to be on the quote of my next art book. Thank you, Jim, for the vote of confidence. None of us are as good as we'd like to be, period. There are a couple of arrogant pricks out there who say, oh, no, I'm a genius. I'm not one of those. I am an arrogant prick, but not about that. Well, I will tell you that lately, it would be disingenuous. I really try to always encourage everyone, don't beat yourself up. But I would be a liar if I said, oh, I'm perfectly at peace. Over the past month or two, I have been going through a period where I have been more critical of my own work, specifically in the sense that it's not that I think I should be a genius or that I am a genius, but I do feel like, at this point, 20 odd years of making art, now there's certain things like basic proportions that should not be a struggle for me. And when I was doing the film studies, one of the things I noticed was that the proportions on my study were really, really bad. Lots of places where if you just looked at the composition and where the different elements lined up, they should be much more accurate than what I was conveying. And I thought, all right, I've admitted that proportion is a weakness for me. I'm not hiding that challenge. But I thought, come on, at this point, I should be just a little bit better than this. I thought it's one of those things where I should be at the point where I can look at it and say, oh, it's a little bit off. But no, these were like way off, way, way off. And I'm like, come on. And that's not just with the film studies, just drawing in general. I think it's one of those things where the longer I do it, I feel like I should be better than I am. That doesn't mean that I should be an Eisner Award winner. It doesn't mean that I should be a master draftsman. But I think that drive, that desire to be farther along than I am is what keeps me going. But there are times, if I'm honest, where I'm just like, come on. Just, I want to be at I want to be at a B plus instead of a C minus instead of a B minus or sometimes a C plus. Let's see here. And HJ says, and thanks for popping in, HJ. Says, hey, Jeremy, looks great. And that's the other thing. One of the reasons why I try to be really, I don't know. If I talk about myself in terms of being comfortable with where my art is or being happy with it, I'm afraid it comes off as sounding arrogant. If I come off as being critical of my art, I worry that it sounds like I'm fishing for compliments or like I'm fishing for people to tell me, you're okay, you're a better artist than you think. And it's not necessarily that I'm after either. And it's more of the fact that I have this constant inner monologue of what's going on in my creative process. And most of the time when I'm live streaming, that's what you're hearing is just this is how my brain is processing what I'm making in the moment. So it's like if I talk negatively about my work, it's like, yeah, I want to be honest that as much as I try to tell other people, don't beat yourself up, I feel like if I say that, but I don't acknowledge that I beat myself up too, I'm a liar. And if anything, I want to be more honest or as honest as possible, even if it means that I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth or I'm giving conflicting messages. Because I think that that's one of the things about the life of an artist that can be maddening is the duality, the conflicting natures of both being self-critical and negative about our work, and wanting to both feel good about our work and having other people say, yes, you're validation. Self-criticism versus self-validation. In fact, that's what this video is going to be titled. I always come up with the names usually, or I try to come up with the names during the live stream so that way I don't have to think of what is this video about, because I never know what it's about. Each time I'm coming out here and just naked in front of you guys making art. All right, let me go back to the comments because I've been rambling for a bit. And James says, okay, decisions. And I forget what that was even referenced to because that's how long I've been rambling. Wow, it's already 40 minutes. The live streams go by so damn quick. Let's see here. Amar says, I used to love figure drawing, but I've not done it in decades. Well, I know that you're super busy with working on the characters for your, both for that collab that you're working on and for developing your own characters in your own project. So I get that. But I do hope that in the future you will be able to find some time to do a little bit more personal figure drawing. Let's see here. And James says, at least you're not an arrogant BMW driver. Yeah, well, I mean, I wouldn't mind having a BMW, but yeah, I try not to be arrogant when I'm on the road. That's where I try to be chill. If someone's like tailgating me, I like, just move over to the slow lanes. Like, here you go. Road's yours. I'm not in a hurry. I'm going to get there when I'm going to get there. Go ahead. Jim says, I am an arrogant prick. He says, I'm going to put that on my Full Fungus poster. Oh, I thought Monsanto was better, but arrogant prick will capture eyes. Martin in the chat. Hey. Good to see you, Martin. Thanks for popping in. Amar says, that can be a shirt. On the front, I'm an arrogant prick. And on the back, it says, I am also an artist. I wonder if one negates. See, that's one of those interesting things. I don't know if one negates the other. I think that the two. In fact, I was listening to Chet Zar's Dark Art Society podcast, and he was talking about the fact that it's not arrogance, but the idea of making something and feeling like, oh, this deserves to be looked at, putting it out in front of the world and saying, hey, look at me, look at what I made. That there's a certain level of courageousness and boldness in terms of doing that. Particularly because, the world tends to just shred stuff apart. Jim says, haha, yes. And let me scroll back down here, get caught up with the comments. Oh, okay, I'm almost caught up. Amar says, that's your Stuart affirming yourself as an artist. Martin says, push forward? I don't know why I said that like it was a question. It wasn't a question. I don't know. Random. Weird. Me being random and weird, not you. And World Builder, welcome back, says, I was just wondering how long you've been making comics or art in general. That is a longer question. Hang on, let me see. Junior Senior says, hey, Jeremy, I was curious what comics you have read and where you have read it just to stare at the artwork. I recently started reading Vagabond, and the images in it are making me stop and stare for a bit. LOL. All right. First off, junior, senior, welcome. Thank you for stopping in. That's a very great question. Both of the questions we just got are longer ones. So I'm going to answer World Builder and then I'm going to come to yours. So be patient and hold on. It's going to take me a few minutes to answer both of these. So first, World Builder says, wondering how long you've been making comics and or art in general. All right. Art in general, I've honestly been drawing since I was a child, like I think a lot of us. But I remember even in middle school, in junior high, there was an art contest for designing the class T-shirt, and I won that contest. So I guess that was the first time that I actually received some actual recognition for making art. But also, my school, my elementary school, had summer school programs that were not mandatory. So they weren't like, oh, you failed this and you have to go to summer school. They were just they had some things like history and science class, or it was English, but it was more sort of like just reading, summer reading for kids that were full-on nerds like me. Well, I say were, like I'm not a full-on nerd anymore. Anyway, one of the classes that was available was a class on perspective, which you would think I would have a better sense of perspective having taken classes at like fourth grade, but it was a challenging, thoughtful class, and I really enjoyed it. So I was taking art seriously then. In high school, that was when I started really getting into comics. Like I started reading them a lot in junior high. And then by high school, that was when I was working with a buddy of mine, my friend Josh, who I'm still friends with today. And we ended up, he found an art studio in our area, some indie comics creators that we partnered up with. And that's when I first started, making comics. And ever since then, I've been throughout college. I started my very first version of my comic book Morningstar, which was the most recent thing I completed. I started that in college. I think I started developing it my freshman year. I was drawing pages of it during my junior and senior year. And then I realized the story grew into something that was much bigger than what I, could pull off. So I took some time away and eventually came back to it. But in terms of publishing comics on my own completely, I would say 2009 was when I published my first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods, which was also something I conceived of. I had the premise in college. That was a very rich time for me, creatively fertile. And I finished Eye of the Gods, and as soon as I completed that, I published it in 2009, but I was probably drawing it for about 7 years while writing and drawing it. I think that's probably about how long it took me to complete that book. And then as soon as I did, I thought, all right, that was sort of my warm-up because I wasn't able to draw Morningstar at the time. The number of characters, the complexity of the story, I didn't have what it took to complete it. So then as soon as I finished Eye of the Gods in 2009, I started Morningstar. And Morningstar ended up taking about the same amount of time. I think it was about 7 or 8 years to complete. Because I completed the last issue like during the first year of the pandemic. I think I published it in 2019, maybe 2020. I'd have to look. Which is weird that it's now, 4 years later and I haven't got the next book out yet. But a big part of that is that as I've gotten better and better as an artist visually, I'm becoming more and more demanding of the writing. And I kind of, at a certain degree, need to let that go and just make the story the best I can with the writing tools I have now, and accept that it's not going to be exactly what I want. It's something I'm still battling with in terms of wanting it to be better, but then getting it to the point where I have made peace with what I can do. So I don't know. Let me know if you have a follow-up question on that World Builder, based on my answer for that. Now, in terms of the question of what I'm reading anything I've been reading recently. So Junior Senior had asked, I was curious what comics you've read where you read it just to stare at the artwork. Well, I will tell you that just recently I read Tom King's The Human Target, drawn by Greg Smallwood. And Greg Smallwood is amazing. Right after I finished The Human Target, I started reading another book of his run on Moon Knight with Jeff Lemire. And I haven't, I'm kind of going back and forth between that and I'm reading the Art of Venture Brothers book. And I kind of want to finish the Venture Brothers book before I go back to the Moon Knight, because I try to mix it up between reading a non-art book, a book that's an educational book about art, and then reading a comic. Like I always try to mix it up and go back and forth, or I try to read like a fiction novel that isn't a comic, a graphic novel, and then some sort of nonfiction. And right now, the Venture Brothers book is feeding that nonfiction, but also art education. So when I'm done with that, I'll go back to all right. That's neither here nor there. The point is that Greg Smallwood's work in The Human Target is amazing. It looks like a classic 50s illustration, like sort of Albert Dorn. I mean, he actually he did a post on Twitter where he showed a lot of his influences. And the only one I can think of off the top of my head is Kyle Baker, who is not a 50s illustrator. He's a contemporary living cartoonist who's done some amazing work. But think of somebody like, if you're familiar with Gil Elvgren, like he's a classic pinup artist. And imagine an entire graphic novel that's like that. Or sort of a Bob Peak, Bernie Fuchs, like not the full-on like painted movie poster look, but more like their illustration advertising work. Feels very Mad Men. That is the style of The Human Target, and it is so beautiful, and I love looking at that. In terms of older books that I look at a lot just because they're beautiful, I really love hard to draw and think at the same time. The Artist of Kabuki does like tons of covers for the artist and writer of Kabuki does tons of covers for he did like the covers for Fight Club 2. Why am I drawing a blank? I've met him in person a couple of times. Worked with Brian Michael Bendis a lot. Why can't you do the recent series cover? Why am I drawing a blank on his name? Why am I drawing a blank on his name? Looking in the chat, somebody help me out. I think he created Echo in Daredevil. David Mack. Jesus, why am I drawing a blank? Yeah, David Mack. Who? It's weird that I couldn't remember his name because I've met him in person at conventions. Super nice guy. For some reason, I can tell you when I'm drawing a blank. It's because my brain is drawing and trying to remember stuff at the same time. My brain's like, nah, bro, you got to choose one. You can think or you can draw. You can't do both. Yeah, David Mack is somebody who, I will just open a book of his and just stare. And it's beautiful and amazing. Another artist, Guy Davis. Guy Davis, mostly he does a lot of film concept work these days, but he drew Hellboy BPRD. I think, if not the entire run, drew it for years. And I actually have not read his BPRD run yet, but my favorite thing of his is a creator-owned work he did called the Marquise, however it's pronounced. But it's about a French guy who's going insane, but he's hunting demons, and the story is sort of like you can't really tell whether the demons are real or whether he's just murdering people because he's hallucinating and imagining things. So imagine kind of like the movie Frailty, but set in Victorian era France. very, very beautiful artwork. Love that. So yes, there's lots of comics I look at and artists I look at just staring at it because their art's beautiful. Dan Panosian, I have only read a few of his comics, but his art is amazing. It's more like I have his art book and will follow his work online. There's another series he did not too long ago that I think is kind of a supernatural crime series that came out. And I have not had, I think it's called Tiffany, and the character name is John Tiffany. And that looks awesome. More often than not, my reading is just limited by the number of hours in the day because there's tons of stuff that I want to read and don't have time to. He is definitely on that list, or that Tiffany book. All right, let me go back up to the comments now. And like I said, for both of you guys, if for both World Builder and Junior Senior, if you have follow-ups to that, feel free to ask. Meanwhile, I will take a look at the comments. And Amar says, artists have a lot of pride and arrogance, especially when they are learned or learned. I think that's how he meant, learned. He said, also, if they think they're better than they actually are, don't let them gain success with crappy art. James says, yeah, staring at artwork. I recall doing that with Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on a Serious Earth. Yeah, Dave McKean, Arkham Asylum is amazing. I am curious whether you've read his book, Cages. Not a superhero book, but a graphic novel that is very metaphysical about a bunch of people that are, the idea of cages is that we all build cages for ourselves. We limit ourselves. We punish ourselves. I think that it's, the life of a creative to a certain point. We build cages for ourselves in terms of how we either limit ourselves or by the restrictions we put on ourselves because it's what we think we have to do in order to create the work that we want. I think it's something that any creative person, whether an artist, filmmaker, or writer, can relate to. That is probably my favorite of Dave McKean's works, although I have the... I know he's done a couple of collaborations with Neil Gaiman. But what's the one I have with the guy who has a terminal illness? Oh, Christ. He's a filmmaker, and he's kind of like making the film in his head. Again, see, this is the problem, thinking while drawing. And what's weird is, like, in the next room, I have all those books. I can literally just go down my bookshelf and just say, I've got this Dave McKean book and that thing. But yeah, Cages is my favorite. Let's see here. Amar says, oversharing and the adulation of this age as an artist creates these narcissistic beasts. It says, here, nerd is good, and you are comics and an art blurred. Hell yes. I'm an alpha blurred, the black nerd. It says, exactly, let the perfectionism go. This is an ongoing conversation Amar and I have had for ages now, in terms of like letting go and just making. But see, that's the interesting challenge, is that I want things to be better than they are. And that's what drives the perfectionism. I think maybe I need to find a balance where maybe I make one thing. That's what I've been telling myself, is that I'm going to have a let the chips fall where they may project and a perfectionist project, and have them both kind of working in. That is a perfect world. In a perfect world, this is the intention I would put out into the universe, is that I could spend my full time just making comics. And in that making comics, I would have one project that comes out regularly, and it is just, I'm telling stories with pictures, and good or bad, some are going to be awesome, some are going to be clunkers, and just let it keep going. And then one project that is going to be that right there goes into the ego that Amar was talking about. One is going to be my attempt to create a masterpiece, my attempt to make something that is perfect or as good as I possibly can. And that one gets worked on in dribs and drabs. And while I might be putting out a couple of issues a year of the regular one, the perfect one is something where, maybe every 5 years I publish this new work that is just the best I can possibly do. And I drop that, and then I start another masterpiece. And meanwhile, I keep working on work. That would be how I would conduct my creative life if I had no limitations in terms of time or finance. That's what I would do. Hopefully I can get there. And Jim Lujan, I finally got caught up to that. Yes, David Mack, in terms of the artist that I was thinking of for people that I look at. And it's funny because they're both Daves, David Mack and then Dave McKeon. Dave McKeon wasn't the one that I was reaching for, but he's definitely somebody whose work I really admire and love. And the thing I love about Dave McKeon is that that he can draw and paint amazingly, particularly when you look at Arkham Asylum. But I actually like some of his cartoonier work where he, James mentions I haven't read Cages. The thing about Cages is that it kind of reminds me of somebody like Jim Mahfood or Eddie Campbell, in the sense that there's a lot of places where Dave McKean will do cartooning in there where it is not perfectionism. It's not about drawing perfect anatomy or perfectly lined up lines, but that isn't the point. The point isn't to be perfect. The point is to express. And while the drawings are not perfect anatomically or perspective-wise, they're perfect expression-wise. And it's one of those things where, in the case of all the artists I named, like Eddie Campbell, Dave McKean, and Jim Mahfood, they're not trying to prove to you that they know how to draw. They draw very, very well. That's not the point of them. Their point is just communicating. And that isn't to say that their drawings aren't well drawn. They're not perfect, but they're perfectly expressive. And they feel like, I don't have to make something that's perfectly rendered with the exact proportions, perfect lighting. They don't need to. They're not trying to prove that to the audience. They just want to get the story out. Which, I mean, honestly, Amar, I was going to say, I don't know what artists you look at for actual entertainment. Like when you just want to relax, what you read or watch. But if you ever do pick up stuff from the library, because that's where I'm doing most of my comic reading now, because I have no more space for physical books. So I just get stuff from the library. But I would argue it's definitely worth checking out Dave McKean, Eddie Campbell, Jim Mahfood. Eddie Campbell is the guy who actually worked with Alan Moore. It's funny. Dave McKean, I think, and Eddie Campbell have both worked with Alan Moore. Eddie Campbell is the artist who drew From Hell, which I don't know if you ever heard of that, but it was a famous comic about Jack the Ripper, and they made a movie from it with Johnny Depp, which was okay. I'm not hating on that movie. It wasn't a masterpiece, but it was done by the Hughes brothers, and I got love for them. So, but I've actually only watched it once. It might warrant a rewatch. But anyway, I would definitely say that all of those artists are guys that I think you might be interested in. So I think they're definitely worth checking out. Let's see here. So Martin says, I think most mature artists are not arrogant because they realize art. Art is beautiful, from Charles Schultz all the way to Leonardo da Vinci and everything in between. I think, well, I'll tell you this. I've read a few biographies on Da Vinci. I will say that Da Vinci was arrogant as all hell. And he had serious beef with Michelangelo, Michelangelo, arguably the best draftsman in human history, or at least one of. Michelangelo was really arrogant and not a particularly pleasant person. A genius, yes, but not necessarily a dude that you would have a good time hanging out with. I don't know. The whole thing about arrogance and art, I think that it does take a certain amount of arrogance, like I was saying at the top, just to say, look at me, look at what I'm making. This is deserving of your attention. But I don't necessarily, personally, I don't look at ego as a negative, because I think you have to have a certain amount of ego in order to create. You have to have a certain expression of will. I think that without ego, you don't make anything. You just sit at home and just consume. I think that ego is an ingredient in art, so I don't look at that as a negative. I think that it becomes negative when your ego is put upon others, inconveniences others, harms others. But I think in terms of our own personal relationship with art, ego can be a useful tool. It can be a useful motivator, not necessarily a negative. And Martin says progress trumps perfection. Perfection is always changing and out of reach. You see here. Amar says horror, action, Asian sci-fi, or supernatural movies. And Amar says, I saw the movie, not the comic. I guess in terms of whatchamacallit. What did I just say? From Hell. What was the last comic you read, Amar? Let's see here. I figure I was going on and on about, the Human Target and what else I'm reading. Oh, well, that other Greg Smallwood thing, Moon Knight. Because I really liked Declan Shelby's run on Moon Knight. He's another creator whose work I haven't read a ton of, but I liked that series he did, Injection. I liked his run on Moon Knight with Warren Ellis. And he is now the writer, even though he is both writer and he is a writer artist, but he is now the writer on the reboot for Thundercats. So for all you 80s kids, Thundercats is coming back. And from what I've seen, I think the first issue is already out yet. Have not read that, but people from the art that I've seen, it looks awesome. So Thundercats is back as a comic, and Declan Shelby is drawing it. If I can be so bold as to give a recommendation for a comic I haven't read yet, I would probably, that's a book that it's on my list of to read. Looking forward to reading that. Although I will say the next comic that I'm probably going to read, because I just saw that at the library, they have the latest Sean Phillips, Ed Brubaker comic, Where the Body Was. And for anybody that's watched me for any length of time, or if you're on my newsletter and you hear about the books, my what I'm reading, what I'm watching, I would say Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips are probably my current favorite creative team making comics. Everything they tend to be crime, sometimes crime supernatural. They did have a crime western with that series Pulp. Not series, it was an OGN. But they're the guys who created that the comic Criminal, which is actually Ed Brubaker is currently writing the TV series now. He's going to be show running it, or co-show running it. Point being is that Brubaker and Phillips are one of those creative teams where what I love about them is that it's a perfect collaboration. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that you cannot tell where the art ends and the writing begins. When I read their books, I will read scenes and be like, as an artist, I see, like, I can't imagine what it looked like on the page that he conceived of drawing it this way. And from a writer standpoint, I'm like, how would you communicate what he drew to an artist? It feels like work that was created of a single mind. And to me, while my favorite artists tend to be writer artists, and Ed Brubaker did draw a long time ago. He had some self-published comics that he drew. Or not self-published. I think they were published by Oni Press. But when a artist and writer make a work that is seamless, that to me feels like a perfect comic. That's what I love to read and see. All right, so This drawing is me trying to correct mistakes and fix mistakes from, wow, all right, wrecking the drawing table here. From this one over here. So that was the original, much less detail. Posture, I think the gesture didn't really work for me. I don't think I really got it. And then coming back here. So this is me trying to correct, having more time to do the posture, actually getting the costume down. So I do feel like this is an improvement on what I was originally drawing. All right, so we're past an hour here, like an hour 10. So let me take a look at the last couple of comments here before we wrap up. And again, guys, I'm trying to not wait until the very end to say this. Hit that like button. If there's other people that you know that you think would be into these kind of conversations, these kind of live streams, just like to hear artists talking art, hit that share button, share it with friends that you think would dig it. If you're new to the channel and you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button. Helps me grow the channel, spread the word. Greatly appreciate it. All right, last couple of comments, and then we'll wrap it up here. So Amar says, I'm terrible. I bought your comics, which, by the way, thank you. I bought your comics, but as far as really reading, I think the last time I read comics, it was in the 80s, maybe the 90s. He said, I have not had the, I think you meant time or space for comics. But I don't, he said, I don't or have not had space for comics. He said, if I see anything online, it's via online or video or explainer videos. Mostly when I read comics these days, it is reading it on my iPad, checked out from my library. I want to support my local comic shops, but I've bought so many comics, I don't have room for new comics anymore. So reading digitally from my library is the way I consume most comics. Or I'll support a Kickstarter on the digital tier, so it's just a PDF on my hard drive. But I would be curious to see. I mean, the reason why I bring it up, Amar, is because I know you're working on both animation and you have stories that you want to tell. You're building a multiverse world. You're building a world in which you can tell comics, animation, and video games using the same characters. And I think it would behoove you to get a better sense of what stories are out there that you like personally. I'm not saying just go there and read everything and get caught up on what's on the market, because there's a lot of stuff that I don't want to read, but there's a lot of stuff that I do like to read. And I feel like I think it would help you shape your work by finding other examples of specific genres and art styles and saying, oh, this fits in with what I'm doing, because then you can look at those people and how they're marketing their work and get a sense of who the audience is for the work you're trying to put out, as opposed to making it in somewhat of a vacuum. I think that it would be beneficial. I think Sebastian Jones and Stranger Comics, his stuff sounds like the most like what your type of stuff is. And I know you obviously, we've talked a lot about Black Sands. I haven't read any Black Sands comics, but I've definitely watched a lot of their videos. So I know that's something that you're into. But I was also thinking, I'll write a little note. I'll post a link in the Discord about Sebastian Jones comics. And I say that mainly because the same way that I was doing film studies last week to try and help me with my sense of values, I think that watching movies to get a sense of, oh, this is what people are making right now. This is what is successful and isn't successful. It helps give me a bar to measure my work against. And I really think that it is beneficial to most artists to get a sense of what your work is going to be sitting side by side, because it'll help you figure out, well, what is the best way for me to distribute this story? Who should I target as my audience? What form should these take? I think that it's a useful thing. James says, I liked The Damned, 3 Days Dead, as far as supernatural crime stories go. If anything, I think The Damned came across my radar. If I'm not wrong, is that Stephen Grant as the writer and Mike Zeck as the artist? I think that I saw that when it first came out, and I don't know if 3 Days Dead is a sequel to the original one. So the one I thought I saw was just The Damned. I think it was either Mike Zeck or Michael Oeming. I can't remember which, but I think Stephen Grant wrote it. Oh, I am completely wrong. It's Colin Bunn. Okay, there we go. Colin Bunn, which I did read Sixth Gun, obviously doing a supernatural Western myself. And what's funny is with the Sixth Gun, I waited until I was probably around issue 6 or 7 of my own book before I read the Sixth Gun, because I didn't want to be influenced by it. And to be honest, if I had read the Sixth Gun before I started Morningstar, I might have given up, because I was just like, there's no way I can draw a Western this good. His work is very, very good. And let's see here. And James says, I don't think it's related to The Damned. Let's see here. And Amar said, the things I know, what I write and saw, I just get distracted and caught thinking about how I'm going to supplement my income so I don't have to go back to work. I know that feeling. It says, that has always been my crutch, thinking about paying bills down the road more than my art or writing. Well, survival is as far as Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that's at the top. So no one's mad at you for getting them bills paid and keeping a roof over your head. You got to do that first and foremost. So no one's mad at you there. You definitely got to do that. For me, the reason why I talk about reading is only because I find that in order to fall asleep at night, I need to, if I draw all the way till bedtime, I can't fall asleep. My brain is too heated up. It's still caught up in the creative process and won't shut down. So I usually will need to read before bed. So I find that having something to read every night, and then when that's done, moving to something new helps. But I also find that if I read nothing but graphic novels, that may warp my sense of storytelling in terms of like the content of what should be in a story. Or what a comic book could be. So I always try to read outside of comics as well, reading prose novels. I wrote in my my newsletter, or actually I wrote in my blog. I can't remember if it was in this month's newsletter. I wrote a review of Sparring with Gil Kane. And it's a collection of essays and interviews that Gil Kane did with other comic creators. And the ongoing theme of the book is that comic books should aspire to literary aspects. And when I say literary aspects, it's not saying that it should be it's not saying that it can't be superheroes or that it can't be action or sci-fi or genre. But in the same way that a film or a novel or even a video game aspires to move their audience beyond just giving them the standard tropes of the genre and nothing more, most genres aspire to do something that is deeply moving and somehow leaves your viewer changed. That's when I say literary aspects, I mean something that you don't just read, digest, and shit out and move on. Whether it's a book or a film or a movie, but something that stays with you, changes you as a person, makes you think about it, or makes you think about the world in a different way. And his point was that comics have that potential to do that just as much as any other genre, but because it started out as a children's entertainment and its genre, predominantly superheroes these days, that the expectations of superhero entertainment and children's literature have limited people's aspirations. And a lot of times, even when the creators have those aspirations, the market pushes back against it, or retailers, and this is not to shade retailers. Retailers are trying to make a business and they're trying to sell these things that they love, which are comics. That they're pushing people towards what they know succeeds, and literary stuff it's a harder sell. And so from pure economics, it makes sense that retailers would be like, we don't want hard sells. That doesn't mean, when a Watchmen comes out, or what is that other book that we just talked about? Arkham Asylum. When Arkham Asylum comes out, those things have literary aspirations. They're, trying to do something different and deeper with the genre. And that's kind of the argument that Gil Kane has, is just, we should try to go deeper. We shouldn't just give the next episodic story of this hero bashing this villain. We should try to go deeper. And he's pushing against people who are just sticking with the status quo, or he's just telling creators they should push for something deeper. All right. Okay. Here we go. Last comments here, and we're going to wrap it up. So Amar says, the area I like is horror, sci-fi, supernatural, action, mixed. That is my area. Well, no, they're all related. Sci-fi, horror, they're close together, and they overlap. There's horror stories that have science fiction elements, and science fiction elements that have science fiction stories that have some horrific elements. He says all of which is a bit all over the place, but that mixture is similar to Star Wars, Star Trek, Road Warrior-esque movies, and Aliens. Yeah, I would say that those are all. They're all things that different genres, but stand, they stand side by side in terms of one person liking all of those. He says, I have lucid enough dreams to remember. That is where I get all or most of my ideas. Let's see here. And James says, good stream today. All right, awesome. That's what I aim for every session. Just want to come away with a good stream. Thank you, James. I appreciate that. I appreciate the encouragement, and I appreciate you showing up every week and joining in and giving rousing feedback and continuing with this art discourse. So on that note, bring it back to the big screen here, get my drawing board out of my lap. I'm going to have to work on this setup and I want to get a better quality camera that can zoom in to give you guys a more crisp view of the artwork as I'm working. But for those of you that would like to join our art book study group sessions, head on over to patreon.com/Jeremy. It's patreon.com/GERIMI. Links in the description. If you're watching on Twitch, links in the description in the About Me tab. Art Book Study Group is a Patreon-exclusive live stream where we do deep dives into some of the best art books around, try to suck out all the knowledge we can. We've been doing a long-running series on Walt Reed's The Figure, which I think is one of the best art books out there on drawing fundamentals. During the sessions, we have the voice channel open on Discord. So instead of just typing comments in the chat, you can actually talk live. We can have a conversation, ask questions live, get into deeper talks about art and more. That's going to be 7:30 Pacific Standard Time tomorrow night, Monday. And if you missed the live stream, there will be an archive there for you to watch the replay later on. And there's archives of hundreds of hours of previous sessions. We've done, Walt Reed's The Figure. We've done some, wow, real brain farts today. Not Bern Hogarth. George Bridgman, figure drawing from life. Some Ken Holtgren, animal drawing, and more. And then just some sessions where I was just answering some art questions on live, doing some art demos there. Anyway, patreon.com/GERIMI, $2 a month gets you in. You get access to the Patreon exclusive Discord server, a online archive where you can read my comics digitally. Head on over, become a member. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you. If you would like a free digital sketchbook delivered right to your inbox, blog post about what I'm reading, what I'm watching, what's inspiring me creatively, work in progress animated GIFs, you can sign up for my free monthly newsletter, newsletter.jeremy.net. Again, descriptions in the link in the descriptions for the video. And if you'd like to purchase physical copies of my comic books, or if you read digitally on Comixology or Kindle, go to amazon.jeremy.net. I'll forward you to my Amazon author page. You can pick up books like my first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods. It is a standalone psychological thriller about a man cursed with visions he cannot control. Hence the eyes. He's drowning in visions. It's clever, right? Check that out. You can check out my most recent comic book series, Morning Star, which is a retelling of Lucifer's fall from heaven as a Western. So it was published as an 8-issue comic book series collected into 2 4-issue volumes. So volume 1 has issues 1 through 4. Volume 2, the conclusion, has issues 5 through 8. Both volumes have extensive back matter, script excerpts, thumbnails, page layouts, photo reference, and more. I basically show you how I put the entire comic book together. And if you would like to see what's inside the book before picking them up, you can go to the homepage of my YouTube channel. You scroll down, there'll be a playlist of book flip-throughs. So actually see as I sit down, flip through all the pages, let you guys see what's inside before picking it up. All right, guys. Again, thank you for all the conversations. Thank you for hanging out, all the great comments. I love spending time with you guys. It's always fun. You make the creative process much more enriching. I love sharing these thoughts and ideas with you, and I'm honored and humbled that you guys spend time with me. All right, that's it for now. Go be creative.